because I don't want to go backwards. I want to keep going forward. Together, that's exactly where we're going to go. God bless.
I'm Steve Alders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
And this is Rewind, Wisconsin's summary of this week in the Capitol. JR, let's talk about John Doe's. But let's talk about, okay, two of them investigated the governor, one when he was Milwaukee County executive, and then the money that was part of the campaigns to survive the recall. Yeah. And now the political fallout has reached the Capitol. And this week the Senate Judiciary Committee approved a bill that would limit the scope of John Doe's. Limit the scope, could not investigate certain crimes. We're going to provide a summary of that. What do you think? Is this a direct outgrowth of the two John Does that investigated the governor?
Oh,
no
absolutely.
doubt.
Republicans are unhappy about how the Doe process worked out because, one, the first Doe, and if you go back and look at the court records, it began as a request from Walker's administration to look into why some money was missing from a veterans fund, right?
Yep.
It grew from that to all of a sudden all these tangents going into Governor Walker, then County Executive Walker's staff, what they were doing on county time. The first hook, if you will, into his staff was an aide who was posting positive comments on blogs and newspaper stories about the governor.
Yeah.
From there, it kind of just grew and grew and grew. The feeling for Republicans was this thing had no real limits and that it was allowed unfairly in their minds to grow and kind of dirty up the governor, if you will. The second one to them was more offensive, if you will, because it gets to First Amendment issues about, okay, they say that there's coordination between the governor's campaign and conservative groups who recalls, but they're saying, look, it's issue advocacy, you can't touch this.
Right.
Several judges have knocked down your theory of your case.
Right.
You keep coming at it and coming at it and coming at it. There has to be a stop. There needs to be some kind of oversight, if you will, these investigations. So it is clearly an outgrowth of the experience we've had last 5 years now in Wisconsin with the John Doe investigation.
5 years. But what I found intriguing, I spent a great deal of that day listening to that Senate committee. And if you limit the scope of John Doe's and you put off limits some of these things like bribery of public officials, misconduct in public office, perjury, campaign finance violations, bribing witnesses, okay, those can no longer be the scope of John Doe's, but GOP senators said, look, we're not limiting in any way ability of prosecutors to still investigate these crimes using existing laws or grand juries. How do you feel about that?
Well, we have a grand jury statute in Wisconsin. It hasn't been used, though, in decades, from what I understand, because of the Doe. The Doe is the vehicle people use for the most part. It would be a different experience for people. So that would be, I guess the biggest thing is, how would that work? What would have the caucus scandal of 15 years ago almost.
2001, 2002.
How would that have looked like with a grand jury investigation versus the Doe? I mean, there are some different powers. The Doe, for example, you're compelled to testify. You know, you don't. There are some concerns, if you will, about that piece of it. Is that fair? Also, there's the secrecy order.
Yes.
And in the federal courts, there have been questions raised, not ruled on, but questions raised of, is that a violation of First Amendment rights to say you can't talk to anybody about what's going on? Well, that's kind of something that if somebody wanted to, they could file a pretty good First Amendment challenge to that statute on that issue in federal court.
You mentioned the caucus scandal, and that was so interesting because E. Michael McCann, Milwaukee County DA for 36 years, and he stood there before the GOP members of the committee and said, I'm a Democrat. Okay, for the record, I'm a Democrat. But he said, had this change been in effect when I convened a John Doe to investigate for then Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Quella, and also charged was former Assembly Speaker Scott Jensen, a Republican. We could not have used John Doe's to do that. And E. Michael McCann, especially emotional testimony, gave everybody, now you and I covered the caucus scandal. There's pretty tough reporting, pretty high stakes reporting. What do you remember about it?
I remember I had just gotten the Capitol when the story broke. My first thought was, I didn't know this is illegal. You know, it's because Wisconsin is unique in some ways, like this bright line of no campaigning on state time.
Right.
So that was kind of first a shock to the system of, okay, this is the way things are done in Wisconsin, or the way they're supposed to be done, but hadn't been for a long, long time. And just the slow trickle, if you will, of like what was going on, the parade of people being brought in to testify about this, immunity granted to many, many people. And I guess the fallout that even 15 years later, if you're hired by a campaign and you've been granted immunity in the caucus scandal, that is brought up some way, shape, or form by your opponent. This is still a red letter, if you will, for people in politics in Wisconsin, or at least they try to make it one.
Right. It was such a part of the fabric of Wisconsin's capital, the caucuses who were doing political work on state time, that when I had covered Iowa in the 1970s, Iowa's capital in the 1970s, but when I came to Wisconsin, my mentor never mentioned the caucuses because it was such a fabric of the way the Capitol did business. But anyway, E. Michael McCann gave a very valuable history lesson in how the caucus scandal came to be. So let's listen to him as he testifies before a Senate committee.
I know what happens. Decent and honorable people come into government, and they find out it's a nasty business. They find out, the Republicans find out what the Democrats are doing and say, hey, I better be nasty too. The Democrats look at the Republicans and say, I better be nasty too. They find out the other party's raising money this way, but nobody comes forward. In the John Doe, there was public employees being used full-time for political campaigning. A lot of people knew it. Other legislators knew it. Workers knew it. Nobody came forward. A young girl who worked for a Republican representative went to the press. That's what started the caucus scandal investigation. A lot of people knew about it. Nobody came forward because they're friends. They respect each other.
The former Milwaukee County DA also said something that I found very intriguing. I'll play the audio and then I want to ask you about it. He said this is going to play out this way. He said, I'm a Democrat, but if you Republican legislators pass this bill and put it on the desk of a Republican governor running for president, that could come back and bite him. So before I ask you about that, let's listen to that very distinct warning that he said.
If this bill is passed, Walker says, gentlemen, I'm a candidate for President of the United States. This puts my integrity at issue. The pundits will say I signed a bill to end an investigation of me. That's what they'll say, gentlemen. Think about it.
E. Michael McCann said, Governor Walker could be criticized publicly for signing a bill that ended the John Doe investigation of him. Do you agree with that, J.R.?
Well, remember the Supreme Court right now has a case before it that could end the John Doe, if you will.
And they've scheduled it April 17th through 20th.
So we expect a decision usually in June-ish with those kind of cases, right? End of the session. Here's the thing, though. There are people who believe that Doe is already dead. There have been a number of court decisions that basically said this is not going to work. Your theory isn't supported by federal law or federal court decisions, if you will, on campaign finance law. So therefore, there's nothing to investigate here. The Supreme Court, got conservative majority. You don't want to assume things, but I think the gut feeling is that they're likely to follow the lead of the federal courts and say, yes, there is a problem with the prosecution's theory. That could end the Doe, put a final nail in the coffin of the Doe. Let's say in June, Robin Vos has said we're not going to take up this bill, or he doesn't want to take the bill until after Supreme Court rules. So if they do the reform change, we're going to call it, after the court decision ends the Doe, there's some space there, if you will. Now, there might be some criticism of the decision itself, the Supreme Court, because a number of justices have benefited, if you will, from the conservative groups who are now part of this case. That will be kind of gnashed out, if you will, in the media. But I don't know if the Governor Walker's going to get dirtied up by it, because if it's already been killed by the courts. Okay, new topic. Officer-involved death investigations.
We can't talk about the circumstances of this latest shooting in Madison, but here's what intrigues me. Last fall, the Department of Justice asked for $738,600 to hire 3 agents and 2 analysts to do officer-involved death investigations. That wasn't part of Walker's budget. Now comes the Tony Robinson death, which, by the way, 29 DCI agents, supervisors, and analysts are working on, doing hundreds of interviews. It's tremendously costly. They're pulling these agents from Wausau, Milwaukee. And so Brad Schimmel now has, it seems to me, a bigger case for having that money put back in, right?
Well, one, where do you find the money? There's tight budgets, so they got to find that.
It's less than $1 million, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, every little bit counts.
Okay.
But yeah, it does bolster his case for you should be doing this. Now, there's also the whole angle of, geez, did you ever think we'd have to spend that much money just to investigate officer-involved shootings? This is kind of an eye-opener, if you will, for some people, the impact of this law that was passed just a year ago.
Just a year ago, 2014.
Dedicated agents just for this. They're anticipating that many shootings. So that's one issue. But yeah, you can go to the Joint Finance now and say, look, there is an extra impetus, if you will, to put this money in there because this is happening. We need to have we need to avoid situations like Ferguson, Missouri, or other places where people feel like the investigation was a whitewash or whatever you want to call it. People get upset about these things and say this was done properly. They're saying, look, in Wisconsin we have a process in place that gives certainty, that gives an independent investigation, that adds some assurances, if you will, to the public about how this was, that was looked at. We need this, if you will, to keep the public's faith in our police force. So there's a better argument with them right now than there was before.
The ACLU put out a press release, said in the last 10 months there has been 3 officer-involved shootings just in the city of Madison. And Dontre Hamilton shot 14 times. I think it was last April by a Milwaukee police officer. Well, at his press conference, the Attorney General, Brad Schimel, said there are more demands than ever on DCI and other agencies in light of Ferguson and New York City to investigate these. So let's listen to the point that Mr. Schimel made at that news conference.
When the law went into place, more law enforcement agencies simply decided they were going to turn to the Division of Criminal Investigation, more than was anticipated initially. And then the events later in 2014 have caused more law enforcement agencies to look to the State Department of Justice to handle these investigations. So it makes sense, given that we have agents at the Department of Justice who have conducted these kind of investigations in the past and have experience in it. This is the kind of investigation that is not for novices.
With 29 DCI employees investigating one officer-involved shooting, how can lawmakers not give DOJ the money that he wants to hire these people?
Good question. One point raised or question raised in the Joint Finance hearings last week was, well, why should the state always be doing this? Can't locals help each other out with this? And the point that Schimel's making there is, this is something that we need experts doing this. This is a responsibility we should have. So it does bolster his case for sure in terms of getting that money in the budget when it's finally said and done.
Okay. Another bill that's going to be acted on pretty soon, well, it cleared the same Senate committee. In 1976, Wisconsin passed a law. You had to wait 48 hours to get a handgun after clearing a background check. Now, this law would do away with that. DOJ says we can get some of these background checks done in minutes, hours. So do you expect the Senate to act on this next week or pretty soon?
Not next week.
Okay.
The calendar next week looks like
not
it's non-controversial bills next week. But yeah, I mean, there's clearly a move toward some changes on gun laws in Wisconsin. This is one that it looks like it has momentum. So I'll be surprised if it passes the Senate.
Is it going to get any Dem votes, do you think?
Good question. I mean, gun laws are a tricky issue for Democrats, especially rural ones.
Right.
There aren't many of those left anymore, but it is something that is kind of tricky for Democrats. So I'll be kind of watching that to see what happens.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Okay, time for our weekly. How's President Walker's campaign doing? And before I call on you, I want to make 3 points. The Journal-Sentinel reported this week, it listed all the governor's campaign advisors. He's created a lot of jobs nationally. Hasn't he? I was surprised by that laundry list. 12, 15, and those are the ones we know about, right?
Well, I think the campaign build has been accelerated, if you will, by his status as a front runner.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a perception in December, January, that, he'll go out, slowly build up, he'll do some speeches, he'll do some travels, and it'll be a slow ramp up. They'll be happy to be in the top tier, top half, if you will. If he is not the front runner, he's definitely a front runner right now. And by the way, conservatives will tell you that the fact that President Obama is knocking Governor Walker and right to work means that he is the front runner.
That gave him credibility,
Absolutely.
Didn't it?
They as a gift to him, for crying out loud. But anyway, this has gone much quicker than I thought it was going to. So the team is being built much quicker than I thought it was going to. Also, by the way, because it's going so much quicker than I thought it was going to, there are the occasional misstep, if you will, where he's still working out some nuances on positions. He's still trying to figure out how to address things. The renewable fuel standard, for example. He said in 2006, no mandates on ethanol, not good for the economy, for the businesses. Now he's saying, I would be okay with it. We want to phase it out, but it's an access issue right now. He's trying to walk a fine line, if you will, to keep Iowa happy while also sticking to his no mandates kind of standpoint, if you will.
And the Associated Press reported that now, at least in his Wisconsin stops, he's not taking questions from reporters. And you and I looked at hundreds of press releases. The governor will be at such and such a time. He will take questions if time allows. They're no longer saying that. Why is the governor not taking questions from reporters like you and I?
It's a breath, if you will, deep breath, and trying to figure out, okay, how do we control the message better? If you think about it, from their perspective, at the Right to Work bill signing on Monday, they wanted Right to Work to be the focus of the news coverage, right? So how do you manage that? You don't want them to ask about anything else.
Okay.
If we had gone and asked...
You don't step on the message. I think that's
right.
the phrase. Okay.
So they're trying to manage the message and keep it as, as he's now calling it, freedom to work, I think is what's his phrase now.
Yes.
He gets his soundbite, and we don't get anything else. You can ask him about, what about renewable fuel standard, Governor, which you said... I'm okay with that. Whereas compared to 2006, there's no competing message at those news conferences now. So for the media, it's a question of, okay, so what do you do? Do you become a stenographer, if you will, for what he says, or do you note that he said this, but they take questions after? How do you approach those? I got to tell you, and all the time I've covered Governor Walker, I can't remember a single time he's been in the Milwaukee media market and not taking questions after a bill signing
right.
or public appearance. Now. Right. He has, I think he signed the budget bill in, was it 11 or 13? They just signed it and that was it. But otherwise, what's the joke? The most dangerous place in mass media is Governor Walker and a microphone, right? So
absolutely.
It is a surprise for him a little bit.
Well, JR, let me ask you, how bad has it gotten? Are you at the point now where you're asking daily if the governor's in Wisconsin? And if you are asking that, are you getting any answers?
A lot of it's being broken by conservative media, where he's going to be. I think the next one's Colorado or something like that, some Western Summit. I mean, the audience for Governor Walker, remember this, the audience for Governor Walker is not really us anymore, okay? He's going national, and he's also going national toward a Republican base. He needs to win over between now and next January for the Iowa caucuses, right?
Okay.
Do I help him do that? No. And I've been dreading this day for a while of when we become somewhat irrelevant for Governor Walker, and it's all about the national media. Now, it's not so I don't get my questions answered. I do. If I email his staff office, say, hey, can I get a quote on this? I get my quote. But Governor Walker is not going to do a one-on-one with me next week, talk about, anything under the sun, because I'm not helping him with the audience he's trying to reach, and that's a reality of where he's at. I mean, in some ways it makes sense. It's disappointing as a reporter that,
yes.
We're not the access we've had before. Because honestly, give him credit. He always answers questions. I think he enjoys engaging the media and taking these questions.
He doesn't do formal news conferences, but he has been accessible after his events. Mm-hmm. We have to give him that credit. He's no longer doing that.
He never flinches too. You can ask him any question you want to. He will not flinch. You can ask. He'll say it to your face. Yeah, I think you guys are biased. I think you guys are covering trivial things. Oh. Talk about my bald spot. He's never afraid to engage the media. And if you look at it, when he's had issues so far in the presidential campaign, it hasn't been in a gaggle with us.
Right.
It's been when he said something in a public forum, which has come back to bite him later on.
Right.
So but it's all about controlling the message right now.
Okay, and this weekend he's going off to New Hampshire. He's got one public event, and then how soon is he going to South Carolina, where I heard in the press room yesterday he's got 4 public events.
So the 19th and 20th, I think he's in South Carolina.
Okay.
He is traveling a lot these days, which also might be why his poll numbers in PPP this week weren't that great, because we're used to seeing Governor Walker in Wisconsin a lot. We're not seeing him a lot in Wisconsin right now. He is off.
6 percentage point drop in terms of how he's doing his job in that PPP poll, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. The time in the show for your stock report. Rising.
Russ Feingold, so that same public policy polling survey has him up on Ron Johnson by 9 points.
50-41, right?
Now, here's a couple of things. Take all polls at this point with a grain of salt, right? We are a year and a half plus out. It's a lot about name ID. Ron Johnson has not done a very good job of building his name ID in Wisconsin. He's, I think, 28% response to that poll didn't know who he was or have an opinion of him. So, take a caveat. But for a guy being out of the public eye for the last 3 years, he's still got some decent name ID in Wisconsin and decent numbers. He was the most popular politician they surveyed this week among Wisconsinites. So that's good news for Russ. Now, he has to build an operation. Once he starts running again, there will be some memories of, oh, wait a second, he voted for the Affordable Care Act. He voted for the stimulus. There will be attacks that will maybe take those down a notch. But right now, he's got to say he's got a pretty good position to be at with Ron Johnson, especially when you think about be a presidential year, higher Democratic turnout than 2010. That seems to favor Feingold right now. But again, we're a little ways away, but a good start for him at least right now.
Yeah, but let's talk as professional reporters. You've asked for a Feingold interview. Wisconsin Eye has. We haven't got any assurance we're going to get one. I don't know about you. So how does he controls his political reemergence in Wisconsin?
Yeah.
How do you think he does it?
Well, first off, he's going to Stanford to teach for a while, which Republicans have been jumping on all over that last couple of weeks, right? He's out of touch. He's going to run for Senate in California, not with all this kind of stuff. So it's an easy throwaway tack line. But he's going to do these listening sessions. He's going to go around Wisconsin, talk to Wisconsinites. He's been tweeting out pictures of himself, like in his favorite childhood park in Janesville, stuff like that. Kind of it's a slow reemergence. Here's the thing. Feingold didn't run a great campaign in 2010. I mean, part of it was how do you run against a guy like Ron Johnson who had no record? And they struggled with that quite a bit. Russ Feingold was known for quirky TV ads, being honest, having this reputation as a fiscal, good steward of the good steward of the public dollar, if you will. And those votes for Obamacare and the stimulus kind of like hurt that a little bit. And it was a great environment for Ron Johnson all down the line. Will Feingold learn the lessons of 2010, run a better campaign? Will he allow outside groups to spend money on his behalf? I mean, remember, we're in the super PAC world now.
Yes, we are.
That was not the world of 2010.
We're so far away from
and Russ Feingold was the anti-soft money guy.
Bill. We're so far away from that.
Will he keep us as a purity? In 1998, what did he say? $1 per voter, right?
Yeah.
You don't do that these days. So it might be a different terrain, if you will, for Russ Feingold than it was he's run before.
Do you think his listening sessions he will open up to news media like us?
Oh, he's talking about doing them privately. I'm going to meet
privately,
one-on-one.
One-on-one.
He will do stuff in public, I'm sure. I'm sure he will be at the state convention this year. I'm sure he's going to build slowly, but he's got time.
State convention in June. Okay, mixed.
Obamacare enrollees. Here's a fascinating number. Of the 180-some thousand Wisconsinites who bought health care coverage to the exchanges, the federal exchange, 91% are getting a tax subsidy. Those subsidies are in danger because of a U.S. Supreme Court decision, or case that's for the court right now.
Right.
Had oral arguments last week. If that subsidy goes away, they go from paying about $130 a month to like $450. What happens then? DHS
insurance.
Kitty Rhodes says that's the federal government's problem.
Right.
We'll have input, but that's their problem.
Right.
This is also a high-stakes game for Governor Walker because, remember, his whole approach to Medicaid was, I'm not taking the expansion money. We're going to take everybody's at poverty and below, put them in Badger Care. Everybody who got coverage before, we're going to put them in exchanges. This is their program. We're going to have it go through them. Now, if you built a state exchange, your subsidies are not in danger from this court decision. We are because we have a federal exchange. We didn't have a state-based one. So there could be a huge fallout for Wisconsin if that decision goes against the exchange, the subsidies. Next couple of months.
And the number that you used is 180,000 Wisconsin residents
yes.
are on Obamacare?
Who bought coverage to the exchange according to the Health and Human Services numbers we saw from the end of January.
Okay, that's about 3%. Anyway, falling.
Scott Walker. What's fascinating is, his numbers are upside down in Wisconsin 4 months after one re-election by almost 4.5 points. That's kind of a big fall. Now, here's the thing. Every governor goes through a rough period after his budget's put out. Why? Because the media picks it apart, his opponents pick it apart, his friends even pick it apart and go, I don't like this, I don't like that. So look at the headlines for the last month and a half. It's been about $300 million cut to UW system.
Senior care.
Senior care.
You want to force 80,000 people to take Medicare Part D. Go ahead.
Long-term in-home health care.
You want to borrow $1.3 billion for transportation.
It's all negative stuff. Now, usually governors rebound in June because they signed the bill. And it's all about the positive stuff. But it's a typical rough patch, if you will, for the governor. The other thing is he's not been around Wisconsin a whole lot. And one Walker kind of backer told me that people in Wisconsin are used to seeing Governor Walker all the time. He is an animal on the trail. He loves to travel. He never gets tired. The guy is unbelievable in terms of his stamina, and he enjoys engaging people in the public. But you're not seeing him in Green Bay right now, or Wausau, or La Crosse. You're seeing him in New Hampshire and Des Moines.
Dubuque,
That's not
New
helping.
Hampshire, South Carolina.
So there is that group of people who don't like he's running for governor, or president, I'm sorry. That's probably hurting him. The budget stuff. And then there's all these negative headlines nationally about evolution, ethanol. It's not been a great run. Now, the other thing is there's been this weird yin and yang of Governor Walker the last few months of at home he's had issues, whether it's the Buck Stadium, it's UW cut, it's tension with Republican lawmakers. But nationally, he's been doing great. I mean, this guy is a top-tier candidate. He's a front-runner.
Rock star.
Doing very, very well. The ethanol comments this past weekend in Iowa, the first time I've seen national conservative media start going, you know, this guy is building his reputation, a brand, as being a straight shooter who'll tell you what he thinks no matter what. Isn't afraid of anything. I can take 100,000 protesters. I can take on, you know, do that around the world. I'm not afraid of anything. Well, here he is trying to walk a thin line on ethanol. That doesn't jive with the message. So, at the same time, that may be a rough spot. He is still
nationally
a front runner.
Playing in that.
So it's not hurting the polls yet.
Lights,
it's not hurting the polls, but it is giving Jeb Bush a chance to go, hey, this guy Scott Walker, the straight shooter, maybe not so much. You know, it's an interesting period for Governor Walker right now.
Fascinating. Let's look ahead. The Assembly is going to pass a bill with both DNR votes on Tuesday that would let WSDOT raise the speed limit from 65 to 70. That's popular. But more importantly, the Joint Finance is on the road. They're Wednesday at Brilliant High School, Friday at Alverno College in Milwaukee. Closing question, JR. Do these 4 public hearings around the state, do they really matter in terms of impact on joint finance, or are these hearings held in the districts of joint finance members to help them politically?
They serve a purpose, I think, to see what they may have missed, or they're not seeing what is the political problem. One of my favorite budget hearings, or Summit budget hearing a couple of years ago, was about the property tax freeze in 2003. They went to Waukesha County, the heart of the property tax revolt, and got nothing but teachers and educators for a day-long hearing complaining about the freeze. They realized they had a problem. They had to go find a new message, if you will, on the property tax freeze, and they eventually, put one in the budget. But this is an opportunity to hear from the public. What are we not seeing? How can we sharpen our message? I don't think it really changes, if you will, big pieces of the budget. They're not going to all of a sudden say, you know what, we're going to take the Medicaid money, expand Badger Care because of this public hearing.
Right.
But they do get the sense of what the anger is out there, or what the issues for people are. Now, what's also interesting is they've made a much more concerted effort, Republicans have, to go out of Madison.
Yeah.
No Madison budget hearing.
Right.
We want to get away. They want to get
Brilliant,
away from
Milwaukee, and Monday, March 23rd, UW-Baraboo, and Thursday, March 26th, Reedsburg High School.
They want to get out of the Capitol culture, away from the professional witnesses, if you will, people who are paid to do this kind of thing, and hear from other people. So they're doing that a little bit different. Now, Democrats, they're saying, look, 4 is not enough. We're doing our own sessions. They're going to highlight UW. I think there's one on the UW campus this week with Madison lawmakers. So they're going to try to do more and say, look, this is not responsible not to do. Have more hearings out there. So a little message game, if you will, next couple of weeks.
Are you hearing the first votes by Joint Finance would be the week after Easter? Easter is August 5th. Do they plan to start voting a few days after that?
Sometime in mid-April. The plan is April through May.
Yep.
And have it done by Labor Day or Memorial Day weekend. Sorry. It is a little bit earlier than last time around, but not much. Remember, Governor Walker said, pass this budget quickly. Let's get it done. I don't think you're going to have it done before. He's not going to sign it before Memorial Day, I'll put it that way.
There's a lot happening. I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
And that's Rewind for March 13th.